Hello everyone, this is the first part of a series of tutorials for Surr Simple Inventory version 2. This part will be looking at how to set up the asset pack itself. So I've created a small little tutorial scene here with a cube as a floor and the player prefab provided. And there's a small addendum for the start of the video. As it turns out later on, I do not have an event system. You need to add one of them, because you cannot interact with any of the UI elements. The first thing that we will probably want to do is we want to go into the layers category. We want to add a layer for items. This is for item interaction, so that because the way it works is if it detects anything in the layer mask, it will pick it up and say, hey, you can interact with this. So we've got to make sure the items have their own designated layers. And then you will likely want to adjust their physics interactions. So here I've got it so that the player, I've got a second layer for the player. So this is so that the player can walk through items, so if there's a big stack for some reason it doesn't get in the way of the player. So we're going to start off with the player itself. So this is the player controller. So this is the script provided. I've made my own first person character controller for this asset because as stated in a previous devlog, one of the main grievances was the lack of a player controller and the need to import standard assets. So this, the cam script, the cam object, sorry, what this is for, this is the object that looks around from a vertical standpoint. So what happens in this script is the object itself will look horizontally, so it'll look left and right, but the player will look up and down. That's what the camera's for. You might want to set that to your own object. So in case you have like a recoil controller for guns or whatever, you might want to put your own on there and like a new item, and then put the camera in that. Camera mouse look enabled. This is a public variable, but it should normally not be edited. It gets set to false when the inventory is open, so you can't look around or move. X and Y sensitivity, that's just how much the camera moves with your mouse, and then invert in case you need it. Forces, so walking. And counter movement is just it caps the velocity at a certain speed, and then also affects how quickly you slow down. So the lower it is, the quicker you'll slow down, but also the harder to speed up. Grounded, public variable, but you don't need to access it. It just tells you if the player's touching the ground or not, and the jump force is how much they jump. Now if we head into the main camera, we are going to look at the camera script. So player character, set this to the object here because we'll be needing this for a later update, which will involve nearby item interactions, and it'll need the bottom of the capsule collider here, or a character controller. The controller script, that will just be fetched from the player character. The inventory handler is this object here, where my mouse is, and the canvas is that object's component. So, moving on to direct item interaction. The raycast point, this is the point where item rays will be cast from. So, that by default, if you leave it to none, by default it will become the main camera. Raycast length is the length at which it will say you can pick up an item. So if you're within 2 meters and you're looking at it, you can pick it up. Description raycast length is the distance from an item with which the in-game description panel will pop up. So the little description panel that tells you like the information about an item. Here it will pop up 3 meters away, while you can't pick up the item until you're 2 meters away or closer. The raycast layer mask, here it's set to item, so that it'll only pick up them, and it won't throw a fit if you set it to default. You could change this logic to instead use tags, but I've specifically withheld from using tags for this system just to keep it as simple as possible. The description display, so this is related to the panel that pops up when you look at items. So just set this to false if you don't want to show it, true if you do, and these are all of the components contained within it. So here it's set. It's not active because we don't want it visible when it shows up when we start the scene. And that's that for the camera. The inventory handler. So we've got two scripts in here. The global variables. These are mainly just controls right now. So you can set these to whatever you want. The defaults are here. So previewing an item, dragging an item, using, so picking up an item, rotating an item, and opening and closing the inventory. Global vars, this will get set automatically. The UI, hiding mouse with inventory. This means that the mouse will be hidden when the inventory is closed. Viewport, this is the object that holds the grids, or like the honestly, scroll recs in Unity are weird. This is just the header, so it's just extra elements in case you need them. The events system, we will be covering that in a future tutorial. So you got different types. So you got to do with adding and transferring items, disposal, equipping, and that's that. The grids. So the grid holder is the object that holds all of the grids in question. So it's this object here. And you can see it comes with two grids. One that is just a standard grid prefab with nothing assigned to it, and this is a grid with backpack. So this means if you drop this grid or remove it from your inventory, it will drop an item, and then pick that item up and equip it and use it if you have it set up properly. So the grid prefab is going to the prefabs folder. It is here. No, in fact, that's with item. Sorry, this is the no item one. Because it's a UI element, it won't show up. There's no 3D aspect attached to it. So grid scale is just how big you want the grids to be. Whatever. Grids. So if you want to have pre-existing grids in your system already, you'll need to add them to this list, and you'll want to add the grid script, which is contained in the prefabs themselves. Dragging object around. Keep this as false because it's public so that other scripts can access it. The description panel, more of the same, giving you the elements. The description, this is the description panel when you click an item, and it will give you the details of the item. Sorry, I mixed it up with the in-game description. So when you left-click an item, it will show up with a description panel and give you a whole bunch of stuff. So about the item, buttons to equip, drop, or destroy them if that's what you want to do. The offset is just how much you wish to move it around. So if I set it to 75, it will move 75 units to the right or to the left, depending on the positioning of the item it's previewing. The same goes for Y. Dropping items. So dropping destroys items. This just means rather than dropping the item and having it fall to the ground, the item is just destroyed. Can't pick it up again. The drop point is just where it drops from. So here it's the camera. Makes most sense because it's where the raycast is from. So it's a bit more sense that the item should come out of it. Drop velocity local. This is the velocity with which an item is dropped relative to the drop point's rotation. So a Z of 3. So if the camera is looking up, that means it will be thrown upwards. The variance is a random spread of the velocity. So the local velocity here for the X can vary between minus 0.25 and 0.25. These sets of variables here, dropping quantity item, correspond to the drop quantity panel. These don't really need to be edited. You might want to change it visually. I'm mainly using stock Unity UI stuff here. Do we need to look at? So let's have a look at these grids. So the ones that already exist. You may wish to change these properties. So these, let's just keep them the same. The grid information, so grid name, and we remove this grid. The amount of columns it has, the amount of rows it has. The accepted items is an item filter. So if I wanted to, say, create a potion bag, all it accepts is oceans. I'd go into this grid, or this accepted items list, add one element, and put potions. This applies to both item tags and item names. So we'll check both. So if you want one that accepts ammo, but it'll only accept pistol ammo, or you want it to accept ammo but also a pistol. So you can say ammo, but then also pistol, and it will work just fine. If you keep it as empty, it will accept every item. The UI components. So this is the panel itself where items will be shown. So here, text, like the name, and the remove button, which will show up and be positioned by the text, should be able to remove it. Grid expansion, you check this, the grid will expand if there's not enough space to pick up an item. So if I have a 3x3 grid but I want to pick up an item that is 5x3, it will expand to that. Target width to height is a ratio to determine determine if it should prioritize expanding width ways or height ways. So a target width to height of 3, as shown here. If I started off with a height of 3 and picked up 3x3 items, it would keep going until it is 9 cells long. So we've picked up 3 items, it will expand width ways. Then it will start a new row. Grid boundaries, grid offset. These are pretty important variables because these are used to determine the bounds of the inventory grid itself, so where the panel is. The X offset here, the offsets here are related to these positions here. So from the top left, go back, remove button X offset, these just move the button around. X bounds and Y bounds, these are public so that the inventory handler can access them, and you don't need to edit these yourself. So these are the min and max X bounds, so from there to there, and the Y bounds are the same but from there to there. It's used to determine the dragging logic for moving items around and where they should be placed. And then, so if we look at the grid with the backpack, we've got an assigned backpack item in it